You are listening to South Niagara Conversations, a podcast presented by the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, along with 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM.
Well, hello, and thanks to everyone who's joined us for our South Niagara Conversation series. For those of you who are tuning in from afar, we represent the communities of Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, Port Colborne, Wainfleet, Welland, and Pelham. We're located in Southern Ontario, no better place to live, work, or play. Joining me today is my guest co-host, Jeff Reuter. Good morning, Jeff. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Dolores. I'm very well, thank you. The sun is shining. It's a little chilly on a fall morning, but all is good.
I got out there at 6:30 for my walk, and it was chilly. Very, very chilly. This morning, we have a really juicy conversation lined up. We're going to be talking about the state of politics, how the role of politicians has changed, the impact of social media to the role, and some general observations about what we saw during the recent federal election. We have an amazing panel joining us for the conversation. Jeff, let's get to it. Who do we have joining us this morning?
Yes, this morning we welcome back Dave Meslin, author of Teardown, Rebuilding Democracy from the Ground Up, Mayor Wayne Redekop, Mayor of the town of Fort Erie, and Kevin Vallier, Executive Director of Farm Fresh Ontario and founder of the Niagara Independent. Mayor Redekop, you're a longtime politician, having first served on town council in 1991 to 1994, then as mayor from 1997 to 2006, and again as mayor from 2014 to present day. Why did you get into politics all those years ago?
The direct answer is I'd always had an interest in politics, but between 1994 and 1997, when I wasn't an elected official, I was appointed to the Town of Fort Erie Library Board. And you may recall that in the late 80s, the Liberal government of Ontario had implemented pay equity legislation. So we were going through the pay equity process at the library. And I knew all of the members of council and very well, and they gave us a hard time in approving our pay equity plan, which highlighted the fact that women, particularly well-educated women working in our society, were vastly underpaid. So I figured if I'm going to make this thing happen, I'm going to have to run for politics. So that's why I ran in 1991. I guess my memory here is a little off. So that was the late 80s. That's why I ran for council in 91. And that got me, that whetted my appetite for elected office. And up until that time, I'd always thought that, maybe I'd be interested in provincial or federal politics, but I'm thoroughly convinced that the most democratic form of government, the one that best meets the ideals of democracy, although it's still a long way off, is local politics, because you're working among the people that you represent. You see them every day. You can't go anywhere without encountering those that you represent. And that's always been a good thing. And to me, that's why local government is typically the most efficient, simply because we have to be, because we're so close to those individuals that we're trying to serve. Plus, we can see the things that we're doing, because we are the level of government that most directly affects the lives of those that we serve. We're working on the roads, the sewers, the parks, the libraries, all of the things that affect people's daily lives. So, sorry for the long answer, but I have a propensity to give long answers. Sorry.
That was a great answer.
Kevin and Dave their turns too.
That was a great answer. And you know what? You're so right. You made such a great point. It is, those local level, the municipal level is the closest level of government to the people. And I always get a little nervous when, there's movements to make it bigger and a little more removed from the people, because I think in my mind, that's a very dangerous thing. Dave, I know you're itching to get into this. I could see your eyes, getting big as Mayor Redekop was talking. Weigh in. I'm sure you have lots to say.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm very jealous to hear of what local democracy feels like in a place that actually has it. Because in our larger cities, a politician can easily go about town and no one will know who they are. They won't interact with their residents because each ward in a place like Toronto, you represent about 170,000 people as a local councillor. So it's more like being, it kind of removes the local feel of it. Whereas in smaller towns, you are likely to bump into your councillor or mayor at the grocery store. The other thing that's great about local politics, and we're very lucky to have this in Ontario, it's more rare than people realize, is that we don't have political parties at the local level, which is probably what makes it the most democratic. If you bump into your member of parliament at the grocery store, that's great. But no matter what you say to them, and no matter how persuasive you are on any issue, at the end of the day, their vote is whipped. They don't actually have an independent vote. Whereas if you bump into a city councillor or a mayor in any town in Ontario, they truly are an independent politician that has to make up their own mind, yes or no, on every single vote. Vancouver has political parties at the local level. Montreal has parties at the local level. Most of the United States has Democrats and Republicans and other labor affiliations at the local level. Our municipal councils are incredible in their characteristic of being nonpartisan legislatures. I would say the Toronto City Council is the largest nonpartisan legislature in North America. It's just absolutely incredible. So we should cherish that and realize how fortunate we are to have that. And what a great contrast to the federal election we just had, where I'll bet most people today don't even know the name of their MP. They voted for a color. They voted for red or blue or orange or green. We've completely neutered the role of the House of Commons, and the legislative branch almost doesn't even exist anymore in terms of its original design of functionality. 338 people who would listen to each other and talk to each other. That doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another interesting. This is going to be such a good conversation. So, Kevin, I want to bring you in because Dave said there's no partisan politics at the local level. I think we have kind of seen a little bit of that at the local level. You want to? I'm gonna lob it your way.
Yeah, there's no question. I think there is. I think Dave's right. It's probably better and worse in different communities, for sure. And I think, it's best to not have those political, those red, orange, blue attachments at the municipal, regional level. And I will say one thing, and I'm not just saying this because the mayor's on the call. Mayor Redekop and there's a few others around the regional council table. What I've watched. What I'm impressed with is, you could watch 20 regional council meetings and Mayor Redekop, for example, I have no idea whether he leans right, left, down the middle, orange, red, blue, because he I think, in my humble opinion, does what's best for Niagara, does what's best for the town of Fort Erie. And I think that's what we need. There's a lot of talk of a conservative cabal a few years ago. To be frank, I think there's been a liberal cabal in the past. So one side maybe gets played up more in local media than the other. But I agree. I think it's really, politics at that municipal level, at the regional level is grassroots, and it's where you can really get things done that impact people directly. You're making sure there's clean water. You're building bridges. You're fixing roads. You're collecting garbage. You're plowing snow. You're just doing those things that I think touch people's daily lives and can hopefully improve them. every day. And like the mayor said, you can, Dave touched on it too. You can meet people in the grocery store and have conversations about things that, the mayor can go back to his office and talk to staff and say, look, I bumped into a constituent and we need to fix this. Here's something we gotta get on. People can email counselors directly, which may or may not be a good thing. I'm sure the mayor loves most of his emails and some maybe not so much, but it's I mean, I really, a friend of mine, Mark Toohey, was chief of staff to Rob Ford, and he just loved the municipal politics. He loved just getting into those issues that affects people's lives on a daily basis. And could Niagara maybe use fewer local politicians? Perhaps that's probably a whole other conversation for a different show, Dolores. But I'm not sure it needs to be kind of slashed and burned like some people. But maybe there's some efficiencies to be had there. But it is unfortunate, I think, when the political stripes creep down, and I don't mean down disrespectfully. I just mean sort of that federal, provincial, regional, municipal. When they creep down into that level of politics, because I don't think it serves the local constituents well. And one last comment, I do find it frustrating when you watch regional council, for example, where there's kind of that low hanging media headline political fruit that can be grabbed, but normally those aren't things that are regional or municipal in issue. And I think that's another way that the provincial federal politics creeps into regional municipal politics is, you'll have a councillor stand up and say, I want to advocate for, I don't know, national pharmacare, national childcare, all these sorts of things. And I'm thinking, well, yes, who doesn't want that? But that's not your job. And I get that that's going to get a nice headline in the next day's paper, but there are a lot of issues in, downtown St. Catharines, or, pick a community, that politicians on the local level can have a huge impact in correcting and fixing and improving. And so it irritates me a bit when I see some of those federal, provincial issues creep into, regional and local politics, because frankly, I think sometimes it's a bit grandstanding. And like I said, there's a lot of other issues that need to be addressed that are very important. So
for sure.
Can I just say that I really appreciate Kevin's comments. And I was with you all the way, Kevin, until you mentioned fewer politicians.
I knew that was coming. I knew it.
Simply because most elected officials in Niagara at the local level are paid a pittance. I think in Fort Erie, it's $14,000 per year per councillor. The amount of time and energy that they put in is well worth the value. And I think that that's typical right across the board. If I had my choice and I was going to eliminate any politicians, I would eliminate regional government, but that's a whole different story. And that may be unrealistic. So I didn't mean to butt in, but I just wanted to mention that. And
eliminate provincial.
Sorry, but the idea about the cabal, I was there the last term, and Kevin's quite right. There was a mixture. There were Tories, there were Liberals. It was all so you couldn't break it down by political party. You could break it down perhaps by interests. Who was interested in advancing a particular agenda, anything. And I also wanted to mention to Dave that I've read your book. I thought there were parts of it that were a little cynical, and there were parts that I didn't think spoke to the smaller municipality experience.
Sure.
But and some parts of it I thought were a little radical. But hey, you're the guy with the pen and the ink, so you wrote the book. I just get to criticize it.
Thanks for reading it.
Book.
Thank you.
Good book. It is a good book.
So when it comes to partisan alignment on municipal councils, absolutely, in every town, municipality, city, there are councillors who everyone knows is a card-carrying member of the Liberals or Conservatives or Greens or whatever. And yeah, sometimes they'll act as a bit of a clique. But the difference is no one's whipping their vote. So if you look at the House of Commons vote records or Queen's Park, you'll find that if there's like 23 Liberals or 47 Conservatives, they vote every single time as a unit, without exception. Canada has the highest rate of parliamentary discipline in the entire Westminster universe. Whereas, sure, there might be a cluster of small c or even capital C Conservatives on a rural council, but you can still sway those individual people on individual votes because there's no mechanisms to force them to vote a certain way. So when I say nonpartisan, I don't mean that there aren't allegiances, but what really destroys politics provincially and federally and has literally made our elected representatives almost obsolete is the degree to which party whips have so much power, and all decision making has really been concentrated into the office of one person, the Prime Minister and the Premier, which was the exact opposite of how our system was designed. Parliamentary democracy was created as a response to monarchy, right? We toppled kings. We literally cut their heads off and then tried to create something that would look and feel completely different, having a legislative branch that was supreme. And we've essentially gone back to a unitary executive branch, which is really sad, I think.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And, the reality is that when in Canada, when the country was created, there were political parties. So Parliament has always had political parties. But in the United States, they didn't so much have political parties. As you know, the states had pretty much the say on who went to Congress as a representative or senator. The problem is that with organizations like government, you're destined to arrive at a point where you've got political parties.
Yeah.
And so that's one reality. And the reality is when people vote, if they're voting red, blue, green, orange, they know what the agenda is. So they should know in a general way what the direction the country is going in when they vote. That's a distinct issue from the power of the chief executive. And that's something that you're quite right. That has gone far beyond what was ever intended. And the concentration of power in the parliamentary, in the prime minister's office is really, I think, detrimental. I entirely agree with you on that. That's the challenge. Take away power from the prime minister and give more power to the members of parliament. That can be done, but that would require a group of parliamentarians to say, hey, you know what? We're going to pass legislation and we're going to shift power from the prime minister to us.
They've done that a bit. They did that when they supported Michael Chong's Reform Act 4 or 5 years ago, which passed the House of Commons and the Senate. But it was really watered down by the end.
Yeah.
But it did decentralize some of the power.
So to me, that's the real point, because you're right. It's not so much the political party piece, I think, that's problematic. It's the concentration of power in the prime minister's office that is the problem, in my view.
Since we're talking about the prime minister's office, Dave, you said in your book that democracy is a train wreck. That's what you said. And that voters are increasingly
very cynical,
turning towards the angriest candidates or simply tuning out completely and staying home. This year, we actually saw very angry crowds. People threw rocks at our prime minister. And by the way, that's not okay to do to anyone, including our prime minister. What is going on? We're Canadians. Like, what is going on?
Well, lots of things are going on, and I'm glad we'll be talking about social media because, that probably is playing a big role right now. That whole election was unnecessary. I think everyone agrees on that. The prime minister would probably agree with that now, looking back as well. I don't think he really gained much out of it. I think in general, I mean, so the largest voting bloc in the election, as usual, was the group of people who stayed home. So to me, the most important indicator, you can look at our society as having two markets. There's the monetary marketplace where we vote with our dollars, and there's the political marketplace where we vote with our ballots. And in both cases, you want them to be really vibrant. You want to have a lot of consumer confidence. You want to have consumer participation. You want to have innovation. You want to have startup companies and new ideas and new voices. We're missing all of that in the political side, all of it. We're essentially stuck with the same two companies operating as a cartel as our grandparents had. And consumer confidence is always at really, really low level. So, what I argue for in the book and in my life is really that we should hold our political landscape to the same expectation that we hold our economic landscape, where we want people participating. And we know that the best way to increase participation is by having consumer choice, having a vibrant marketplace, and encouraging new voices and startups and even market disruption, where like new players enter the field and shake things up. And you could look at any product. Let's take beer, for example. What's been so exciting the last 20 years is all these little small, microbreweries and what's it called? Like small batch art beer. And essentially when I get my ballot, it looks to me like it's just Molson and Labatt. And it's going to be, the winner is going to be blue or red. And it's these two parties trading power back and forth for 150 years. And I don't blame people for being bored and being frustrated and feeling like the system is uninspiring and just tuning it out. Mm-hmm. I have to drag myself to the polling station myself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really want to dig a little deeper into this. I know even from, our chamber perspective, we're always tasked with, hosting debates and trying to get our members engaged. And it's painful. It is so hard. We try and come up with different ways to engage people. We this year, it was virtual, of course, but we just don't have that same level of excitement, engagement that we had 20 years ago. And I don't know how we get that back. And I don't know how we get other players to the table. There are other parties there. They just never get any traction. And I don't know how we get more on the ballot. Kevin, you've run campaigns in the past. I know that you understand this better than most. I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if I understand it better than most, but you're right. I mean, I have been involved, somebody I know was Dave or the mayor mentioned social media. And I think over the years that's played a huge part in no other reason than it's created all of this noise. Before that, I think we did talk more about the issues in terms of, party platform and what parties are going to, proposing to do for the economy and for healthcare and education or whatever the case may be. And now it's just such a dirty sport, and it's the gotcha politics. I don't think the media necessarily helps, whether it's mainstream or not. And I mean, I tip my cap to anybody who puts their name on a ballot, because it's just, I don't know who would want to, and it's a shame. I mean, we went through that period maybe a decade ago, and I don't know if where people talked about, we want to, sort of the common person, a person of the people, and somebody who understands, the average Joe kind of thing. And I used to kind of shake my head and think, no, if this person's running the country, I want the person with the Harvard MBA that's run a multi-billion-dollar corporation that, or the person that's got a PhD in whatever, male, female, doesn't matter. In fact, it'd be great to have a female prime minister to lead this country. But I think just such a dirty sport. There's so much nonsense on social media. It must be incredibly frustrating as a politician to kind of try and filter your way and swim your way through all of that noise to actually get to the real issues that people want to know about and want to hear about. I mean, the train is so far down the track in terms of that I don't know how we kind of walk it back or how you control it. But yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get away from essentially a two-party system. I know there's, the NDP and the Greens as well. And, they kind of make strides one election and they seem to kind of stumble and fall back, or they stall. So it ends up, as Dave said, sort of the two longstanding political parties that kind of duke it out closer to election day. But it is frustrating. I mean, I still think it's important for everybody to vote. I think it's sad when you look at the number of people, as Dave said, that don't vote. I sort of rolled my eyes when the prime minister, and paraphrasing here, but I think it was the day after election, he, thanked Canadians for giving him a mandate to move forward. And I'm thinking, a mandate, like 70% of this country did not vote for you. You got roughly 30% of the vote. I'm not sure that's a mandate.
And that's out of the people who voted.
Yeah, exactly.
So if voter turnout was, let's say, around 60, so he has a mandate or an expression of support from maybe 20% of the population.
Yeah, it is. It's frustrating.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you just said.
Participating business of the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, an amazing online presence for you, has arrived. NiagaraGiftCards.com is a website for you to sell your business's gift cards and receive 100% of the proceeds. Increase your digital presence and build your business. Join the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce 6-month pilot project for free today. Visit NiagaraGiftCards.com to learn more and to fill out the sign-up sheet. The South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, helping businesses grow.
So I think it's changed so much. And Jeff, if the rest of you don't know, Jeff's dad was the mayor of Welland for 9 years, I think it was. Great mayor. And I remember when he was mayor, you took your hits in the local paper. There were letters to the editor, and people could respond. And sometimes there was some really outrageous stuff, and it was critical. That was almost 30 years ago. Now it's every day you get hammered on social media, and it's personal attacks. And I think that's why, there are so many people who just would never consider running. And I think that there were issues this time around in the election in getting candidates to run in certain ridings. I think it was a struggle. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've touched on so many
interesting
topics and areas. And, we talk about the two main parties, the green or the red, and then how it can filter down to municipal politics. But what's interesting to me is the fact that we actually have more parties at the federal level now than we did, say, 50 years ago or what have you. And I think as a result of that, we're ending up with these minority governments at the federal level. And, the last election showed the Liberals moving more to the left. I don't think we can argue that. And even the Progressive Conservatives moving more to the left. So here we've got more parties, and there's a definite shift, and we're ending up with a minority government. So are all of these things, are we going to see more of that in the future? Are we going to have difficulty electing a majority government? That to me is a very interesting topic in the change of politics. And I don't know who wants to jump in on that, but
I'd like to jump in quickly here because, we can't be talking about all this stuff without talking about the voting system we use in Canada. So we are the only member of the OECD that uses first past the post for all three levels of government. We're kind of an outlier amongst outliers. And every problem we've talked about in the last 15 minutes, we've never had an elected female prime minister. There's a lot of polarization, only two parties, low turnout. So many of these things are a product of our voting system. So if you look at Western democracies that use more modern or normal voting systems that give you results that actually reflect what you voted for, you'll find that there's multiple parties, way more than two. They're working together collaboratively. They have fewer elections because there's less of a mathematical incentive to roll the dice and go back to the polls because you're pretty much going to get the same thing you got the year before. And there's more civility and cooperation. So you could look at New Zealand, another former, Commonwealth country, Westminster model. They elected a majority Labour government last year, and the female prime minister invited the Greens to join her cabinet just for fun because she liked working with them the last time. You could look at Finland, which has 5 parties sharing power right now in a stable coalition, all led by women, all five female leaders. You could look at Germany, which had an election a few months ago, and they're going through a process right now of 3 parties working together to form a coalition government. So they don't use the term minority government in any of those countries. They assume that no party is going to win a majority, but then they actually talk to each other and they form these coalitions. Way more women in power, more stability, more choice, more civility. And the way forward for Canada to change our voting system is all about municipal. I know Doug Ford banned ranked ballots last year, which was hilarious because he was elected leader of his party using a ranked ballot. But whichever party forms government next in Ontario, they've all committed to bringing back the choice of municipalities like Fort Erie or anywhere else to use a ranked ballot. And I think that's where we have an opportunity to really transform the political landscape in Canada.
So can I just weigh in here because, Dave, when you talk about stable governments, you've failed to mention Italy or Israel, which has been a basic horror show in attempting to stabilize their democracy. They have frequent elections, frequently don't accomplish anything. So, sometimes we lose the forest for the trees. And as all of you have been speaking, and by the way, I served with Dick Reuter back in the day. So I knew your dad and I liked your dad.
Thank you.
He was very professional, very professional. When I hear you guys speak, I think of the old adage, the people get the government they deserve. And that's exactly what's happening in Canada. We get the government we deserve. There have always been a multiplicity of parties. Remember the old social credit from Alberta, and then there was the period of time when we had the Tories, the Reform, the Liberals, the NDP. I think we had Greens maybe then as well. So that there's always been that multiplicity, but people will gravitate towards what they know. And the reality is that there's not participation in a lot of things. There's been a real shift in society over the last 50 years, and I like to attribute a lot of the blame to the baby boomers and the way that they raised their children and the way those children raised their children, and on and on and on. And so that's not to bemoan that the current generation or the generation before that is missing in duty. It's just that there's a lot more people that are quite casual about their responsibilities, and so that that's a problem to be addressed. If I were the head of a major political party, federal political party, and I wanted to change the channel, what I would do is a vast public consultation process to legitimately find out from the public what it is they want. And then I would try to work on that. That's an ideal that I think is far from happening, because when you do public consultations, you frequently hear things that you don't want to hear. You're being asked to do things you maybe don't want to do. And of course, the Prime Minister, I think in 2015, promised to change the electoral system, and then somehow was able to backtrack on that pretty significantly. I think he backtracked all the way to New Zealand and then didn't like what he saw and came back. The reality is that people think that that's a serious problem. They should have turned on the prime minister and his party. They didn't. And so now, I like elections, and I'm always amused by people who say that that's an unnecessary election, because that happens almost every election, unless it's one of those scheduled 4-year elections. People will say, oh, we don't need this election. The reality is that we live in a democracy. People should rejoice every time we have an opportunity to pick who is going to lead us, whether it's federal, provincial, whatever. So I don't have a problem with that. Hopefully the politicians will learn something. One would have thought that Trudeau might have learned something from the fact that we went through that exercise, spent $600 million, and essentially came back to where we started. There are lessons to be learned in that. I don't know that the Prime Minister has learned any of those lessons. It's also very similar to the election when Dalton McGuinty came back with what he called a major minority. He didn't obviously learn anything from that whatsoever. So that's the problem. And it all starts with the people. If the people don't demand something better, then they'll continue to get what we've got. And the idea of ranked ballots, I think my view is you could throw up almost any type of system and you're still going to end up with the winners being the winners. Although if we had a system where first past the post wasn't the model, then you're right. We would end up with a more diverse parliament, legislature. I don't know about the local level, I'm very fortunate, and I'm not, I guess I'm not the person to be commenting on bodies that aren't diverse. We have 3 females, we have 3 males. We have a range of ages and experiences. And so Fort Erie is very fortunate right now because we've got that mix. And anybody that thinks that having diversity on your deliberative body isn't beneficial is just missing the whole point, because you're starting to hear views from individuals who have different life experiences. And that's really what government should be all about. Not, I agree with Kevin. When I was in university and was studying politics, there's this great notion that in Britain, people would prefer to have those who govern them be better educated, be more experienced, have greater life experiences. I don't know if that still holds true, because there's a lot of navel gazing nowadays, and social media has really created significant problems where you've got this amplification of ideas, and the people here in this box are always listening to other people in this box and are amplifying that. Mm-hmm. And then there's the people in this box that don't agree. And so what happens is the emails that we get are somewhat extraordinary until you block them. And, going through the pandemic, we've just had, I didn't realize there were so many lunatics out there, but well, I shouldn't say that. They simply disagree with my worldview. I didn't realize there were so many people out there that didn't see the world the way I do. And social media, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I haven't been on Facebook now. It's got to be going on close to 2 months, simply because there's a lot of information there that I think is helpful. But I don't communicate with people through Facebook. I've never done that. I know that there are elected officials who do, and that's great. I get lots of emails and I respond to all of my emails, telephone calls. I don't get any letters, or very few letters, but I respond to them as well. And I'll go visit people because I like to be with people. This pandemic has created a real problem for elected officials who are engaged in public life, because we love the public. We want to be around people. We want to touch people. We want to see them and live their experiences. You can't do that on Zoom. So it's been a real challenge. But this is a topic, Dave. Your book has lots of suggestions, and I think some of them are really good. And I guess the question is, will the public actually take those up? Because if we're talking about a marketplace, which is what you did, you compared politics to the commercial market. If it is a marketplace, then the customers have to say, we don't like this product. We want to change this product. Give us a better product. And until they insist upon that, until the members of parliament insist that they have more power and they take it away from the prime minister's office, those things aren't going to change. So there is a solution, and the solution rests with us.
So let me just jump in here really quickly. So let's talk about market share for a second. So how does a small startup microbrewery become successful? Well, they have to start very small. You have to sell your first beer, and then you sell 10, and then you sell 50. And what happens in the private sector is that market share and revenue are connected. If there's a marketplace or a sector worth $1 million in annual revenue, and you're able to somehow corner 10% of the market share, you'll get 10% of the revenue. So $100,000, and then you can grow and invest and get bigger machines. So what I want to challenge the mayor on is this idea that people in Canada get what they vote for, because we do get the beer we order, but we don't get the politicians we vote for. A party can get 10% of the market share, which is 10% of the votes, and get 0 seats easily. So that would literally be like a beer company selling 10% of the market share and not earning a single dollar. And what happens is those parties just either they're never able to get the traction to grow. So in Toronto, I think the Liberals won every seat a few weeks ago, even though there's tons of conservative, thousands and thousands of conservative voters who went and ordered their blue beer, and the people ordered orange beer, people ordered green beer, and all they got was red beer. So what I'm proposing is definitely not the voting system they use in Israel or Italy. They don't even have ridings. They use a purely proportional system without any ridings. I've never heard anyone propose or promote that for Canada. What we're talking about is hybrid systems that give accurate results, that give you the market share and the revenue that you earn at the ballot box, while also keeping our local ridings. And those are the hybrid models I was talking about in Finland, in Sweden, in Germany, in New Zealand, in every single European country on the mainland. This is the normal way to run elections. And I agree with you. In a democracy, people get what they vote for, they get what they deserve, and if they want change, they should vote for change. That only works in an electoral system that gives revenue for market share. And you mentioned the Reform Party as well. Where's the Reform Party now? They had to merge back. Every time a new party splits off, Wild Rose, gone. Reform Party, gone. People are always encouraging the NDP and the Liberals to merge because of vote splitting. We need desperately a political landscape that encourages reforms and Wild Roses and NDP and Greens and the Kevin Party and a Jeff Party and a Dolores Party. We need choice, variety, startups. We need all votes to count. And if we do that and join the rest of the modern world, I think we'll find a political landscape that's more civil, more interesting, more participatory, and more people engaging.
As long as you get past the apathy of the vast number of people who don't vote.
Right.
And you're right. It could be that they're apathetic because they don't think that they're going to like the result, or they think it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You know, there are some things that we could be doing in society as well to encourage people to be engaged.
Yeah.
And until one of the two major parties adopts the notion that they are going to change the electoral system, that's not going to happen. And, you know, if you're a liberal, there's absolutely no reason why you would want to change the system that favors you. And if you're a conservative, you're thinking that even if the system favors the liberals, every several years, people get tired of that group and they want another group in. And so that's what happens. I mean, don't forget, this has been going on in the United States. They haven't had a third party for decades. And for really over 160 years, they've had the two parties duking it out. And of course, that's Canada. Canada, you could say Canada is a mess in that regard. The United States is a mess to the 10th degree. I mean, it is so polarized. It's dysfunctional. I legitimately fear for the future of the United States because I don't see how they extract themselves from a spiral. Now, my brother, who's very well educated, studied politics, and is of a different political bent than I am, isn't quite as pessimistic. He's a bit more casual in his concerns, and so I frequently will attorn to his views because I think he's smarter than I am. And you should always attorn to smarter people. Or could you?
I think too, one of the biggest issues is how do you get people's attention? And Kevin, I'm going to ask you that question, but first, a quick shout out to our sponsor, the Small Business Enterprise Center, City of Niagara Falls. Thank you for your support.
Do you have an idea for a small business? Maybe you're trying to grow a business that you've already started. Whatever the case, the Niagara Falls Small Business Enterprise Center is a community service that is here to help, offering entrepreneurs the tools to start and grow their businesses. The Small Business Enterprise Center is your one-stop for free business information and advice. Serving Niagara Falls and South Niagara, learn more about how we can help you and your business succeed at niagarafalls.ca/SBEC.
Kevin, how do we get people's attention? How do we get them to care?
And to add to that, is it a chicken or egg scenario?
Right.
Are people upset because of our system, or is it the system,
Yeah, excuse me. I think, first I want to say, and I'm pretty sure everyone on this panel will agree with me, and I think it's important to say, and there's the irony isn't lost on me here, where, Mayor Redekop wearing his poppy, and we're 6 days away from Remembrance Day, and the brave men and women that fought that we have the opportunity to go vote, and we have the opportunity to live in democracy and
Good point.
all of its warts. I think the greatest country in the world, and it is shameful that voter turnout is so low, federally, provincially, municipally, and I think, so I just, I think I wanted to thank our veterans and those that are serving now, because, and I think it's a shame that, more people can't take 5 minutes out of their day and go to a polling station and mark a ballot. All of the other reasons aside, you should be able to do just that. In terms of getting attention, I touch on what the mayor was saying, and the polarization, I think, is a problem, and I think it's, the Facebook, the algorithms of social media platforms, all of them kind of run on where your feed, they're just feeding you everything that you already believe in. And, when I was, founded the Niagara Independent, small little online news site, and, the comments that I received that I appreciated the most was the people that said, I don't really agree with, some of the editorial pieces, or, I think it maybe leans too conservative or what have you, but I find it really interesting and I learned something, and it got me thinking. And there's not enough of that anymore. People used to sit down and read, over coffee, they'll read the National Post, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, and then they'll form their own opinions. And there is a bias in every one of those news outlets, and that's okay. And they don't hide from that, right? And I think nowadays everyone is just driven to their camps, and the further left that this side goes, the further right the right goes to dig their heels in, and it started here, and it just sort of keeps pushing. And I'll say I'm a sort of a red Tory, if you will. I was fond of the government with Mr. Chrétien as Prime Minister and Mr. Martin as Finance Minister. I thought they did a great job of running the country. They had a lot of tough decisions to make. They balanced the budget. They had to slash and burn in some areas, and people may not have been fans of that. But once you get that spending under control, then you can reinvest that money into social programs and giving people a hand up instead of a handout, so to speak. I think we've kind of lost that. Everyone is sort of drifting. You know, I mean, Jeff made a good point. You could argue the conservatives actually moved further left in some places, and I think that was to get away from this rhetoric where every election, and frankly, I think it gets tiring, where they just lob these cannonballs at the conservatives, and they bring up abortion and gay rights, and it kind of gets tiring, because no matter what conservative leader says, those, we're not going back and reopening those. We're conservatives in the sense of, fiscal responsibility. We're going to lower taxes. We're going to have smaller government. We're going to invest in business. Generally speaking, that's sort of what the conservatives sort of stood for, a decade, 20 years ago. And the liberals were kind of more in the middle. And then the NDP, if that was your choice, was on the left, where maybe taxes went up and they spent more, but they spent it on social programs. And that was their philosophy. And all three are fine. And you can sort of kind of pick and choose where to park your vote on what you thought was best for the country. But I think there's a lot of people that are kind of down the middle, that if they liked, the direction of, say a Martin Chrétien government, they would park their vote there. They might have leaned a little more right, but hey, I think I like what these people are doing, or vice versa. And I think now there's a lot of people that are sitting there thinking, federally and provincially, where's my party? I talk to a lot of people who are card-carrying liberals that say, this isn't my liberal party anymore. I'm lost. I mean, they're so far left, and the spending is so out of control that this isn't, I don't know where to vote, because I don't want to vote for the conservatives because I hear that they're so far right. And I don't want to vote for the NDP because they're never going to win. Right. So I think it all sort of, you get this wash machine of all of these things going on. And, and so, sorry, Dolores, I kind of went off on a tangent there and didn't get back to the
conversation
actual question. But in terms of, breaking through that noise, I mean, you've got these big machines on social media that are controlling all of this messaging, and it's tough. I still believe in the good old fashioned door knocking, and I don't know if the mayor would agree with me or not, and, handing that
big time
piece, and that, having the face-to-face conversations. And I know that's easier to do in a smaller community. And, Dave talked about, a riding in Toronto where you've got 110,000 people. Obviously that's more of a challenge. But it is tough to break through that noise. And I don't know what the answer is, to the mayor's point, is people smarter than me that might figure that out. But, it's probably been a campaign or two ago that we, sort of ran that last campaign, and there was social media, but it wasn't kind of the machine that it is now. And I'm not sure how you break that.
One of the big fears I have, Kevin, just to address a point that you had raised before somewhat, and Dave, maybe you've thought about this, is that, a lot of good, qualified individuals who should be seeking political office just don't bother.
Mm-hmm.
And the climate is such that successful people in whatever walk of life look at the landscape and say, why would I bother? Why would I put myself into that mess?
Yeah.
So that, when anybody says that they appreciate those who put their name on the ballot, that's great. But we need more well-qualified people, in my view, to put their names on the ballot. They need to, I think, take on that responsibility, the civic responsibility, because we do have responsibility in our society. Those that have the ability should be taking on that responsibility. So, you look at families that have a tradition of public service. We need a lot of people to grasp onto that particular responsibility. And, maybe the things that children are taught in school aren't adequate. You can get a lot of these things through your family, but if you don't get it through your family, where are you going to get it? You're not going to get it. And so I don't know what the answer is. And as long as social media is out there and people pay attention to it, I guess maybe that's the answer. Just don't pay attention to it. enough people raise issues with me and the methods that I'm using that I don't need to be whacked out about what somebody says on social media. So people need to take that approach. But that is, to me, that's a concern as well. That's as big a concern about what the system is and how people get elected. It's who's running for office. And when the older I get, the more I've seen, the more I've experienced, maybe the more I become like Dave, I become more cynical about what's going on. And I look at the leaders and I look at elected officials and I think, good Lord, is that the best we can do? and that's, maybe that's a little unfair because people are working hard to get to where they are. But, we've got 338 elected officials at the federal level. And some of them are crackerjack. They're the best that they could be and the best that we could expect. And then there are some that, not so much. Mm-hmm. And even when you look at the ethics of some of the people who were elected, in particular, the guy in Toronto, well, really? Is that what we're expected to be harnessed with? So I'd be more concerned. I'm a bit more concerned about that than I am about the first past the post. I mean, that's never going to change until the public decides it's going to change. And so we're going to vote for the party that says they're going to change this, and we believe that they will do that. And if it's not one of the two main parties, it's not going to happen. You're quite right. There are too many, there's too many reasons why people will not en masse move to one of the other parties. It's unfortunate that Leighton passed away when he did. There might have been some momentum there for a third party, but barring that, I don't see. I guess I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, this has been such a great conversation. We have to start wrapping it up. We need to have you all back because there are so many different directions I want to take this conversation in. Before we go, one last question, just quickly. So we had a record number of Canadians this past federal election, 850,000 of them vote by mail. Way of the future? Thoughts on that? Quickly, anyone?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. So I just recently published the Ontario Municipal Democracy Index, where we compared the 32 largest municipalities in Ontario based on a whole bunch of different measures to gauge their democratic health. And one of the measures was, how many ways do you offer people to vote? And we didn't give different points to different kinds. We didn't say this kind is better than this kind, but it's all about choice. So if you get a bill in the mail, Dolores, you can pay it online, by phone, you can mail it in, you can go to the bank. And I think elections should be the same. We found only one municipality in Ontario of those 32 that offer 3 ways to vote. It was Thunder Bay. You can vote by phone, you can vote online, or you can vote with a piece of paper at the ballot box. And sure enough, the highest voter turnout of all of them was Thunder Bay. They were the only one that cracked 50%. So to me, it's not about whether you can mail in or not. It's about, do you have choice?
Right.
I think we should offer as many choices as possible. The only thing it'll do is increase participation.
Good point. Great. Jeff, wow.
I agree. You can vote online as well. I mean, I would think you could vote online as long as you've got the security.
Right.
Yeah, more choice is good.
More choice is good. It's unanimous.
Very profound statement, I know.
Jeff, wow, what a great conversation this morning, huh?
Yes, very good. And thank you so much to the three of you for a fantastic conversation. Dolores, what do we have planned for next week?
Well, Jeff, next week we're going to have a conversation about the land borders, what the reopening looks like, what travelers can expect, and what our U.S. colleagues are experiencing. Joining us for the conversation will be our good friends, Corey Schuler, Executive Director of the Niagara USA Chamber, and Craig Turner, President of both the World Trade Center, Buffalo Niagara, and Momentum. To all of our listeners, send us the topics that you're talking about because we want to talk about them too. Thanks again for tuning in and have yourselves a great week.
Thank you all.
Everyone.